Welcome back to Human Powered. I'm Jen Rubin, and I'm here with Jessica Becker, snowed in the northwest of Wisconsin.
Yeah, we're having a snow day. And we're really excited to talk to someone named Garrett Bucks, who Jen and I have read his work. He's based in Milwaukee, which is pretty cool. And his work is really aligned with stuff we talk about here, how we each can contribute locally and and sort of what that means for building a more connected and healthy civic society. And I think he's just, it's going to be a really good to hear from his perspective.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to him because I'm really interested in the work he's doing. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Well, we're all sitting here. We may as well set some context. We're all in the midst of an interesting snowstorm that is kind of going to be one of those things that Wisconsinites remember for a while, right? And it's bringing out some interesting challenges, but also, I think, how are people coming together during these things? These fun moments that we'll tell stories about, right? So here we are, sitting down in a snowstorm, talking to Garrett. It's great to be here with you in this hopefully cozy space.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks for having me. And I do feel pretty cozy. I hope you all do too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, since Jessica's saying the context, Jessica's snowed in up north. Garrett's kids are having a snow day, and they're at home, and I'm just in the same room I'm always in. So yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation. We were just saying, so Garrett, you're the first person we're interviewing that neither one of us know. We both, for whatever reason, you're in our social media algorithm.
My apologies. Yeah.
I read your Substack, and I think maybe we follow each other on Instagram.
I think so.
And you're doing really sort of innovative, positive, hopeful community building work, and so we thought you'd be fun to talk to. So you could just tell us a little bit about what is it you're doing? What's your origin story?
Yeah. So I'll start with origin story. So I grew up 5 or 6 kids within a very, very social justice-y, do-gooder family in Montana. And so, I think very, very much for the work that I'm currently doing right now, and this focus on being a good neighbor, social change through community building. I actually had examples of that from very early on. I grew up in the kind of household where when I would go up to bed, there were often still grown-ups down in the living room having meetings about how to fundraise for the sexual assault center, or how to fundraise for the homeless shelter, or how to work on electing this political candidate, or how to get traffic calming measures in, or who should run for school board, or anything that was just at that time needed for the community. And so that lesson of how you be a neighbor was right there for me, right? But I was, you had to figure out the lessons for yourself. So as somebody who cared a lot about social justice, but probably also in particular, let's be honest, as a white guy, cared a lot about the sound of his own voice. For a while, I think my pathway to social justice was, how do I do a thing that seems really big, bold, and loud? And some of that was in the kind of nonprofit work I was doing, but a lot of that was just, I came up of age in an era of social media yelling, and where trying to make the world a better place was just about having the loudest and most strident opinions. And, the good news about that story is I got to live in a lot of places and be in a lot of different communities. Lived on the Navajo reservation, lived in Stockholm, Sweden, lived in Chicago, worked with a lot of refugees there. Life brought my wife and I up to Wisconsin, first in Madison, and then we moved to Milwaukee, where actually we've been settled for a long time now, since 2009, and worked in particular kind of in the education nonprofit world for a long time. Again, great connections, but a lot of regrets on my part that a lot of those connections, in particular after I moved here in Milwaukee, I was meeting a lot of people and I was having a lot of conversations every single day. And I liked a lot of those people, but the meetings I was having were largely transactional. They were work meetings with folks. And I was having meetings with people who I thought would be useful to the organizations I was working with. They were meeting with me, when vice versa. And so I kind of looked up around at my life around 2016 or so, which as somebody with my politics, kind of a liberal leaning person, was a very popular time to have an existential crisis about the state of the world. And I looked around and I saw, A, I don't like the direction the country's going. B, I've been in the nonprofit world for a long time, and I think anyone who's been doing that for a while feels both a pride in what you've done, while also the disconnect between the stories you're telling in grants and how much the world around you has not changed. And I was just looking at my personal life and realizing, oh, somehow I've spent 80 hours a week in a people-oriented profession for a long time, and yet I'm really lonely. I don't know anybody. And the dots sort of connected themselves for me, that somehow the ways that I was isolated from other people and have been doing work and also politics in ways that were isolated from other people. I don't want to be self-aggrandizing and say like my mistakes caused a kind of broader atomization of America, but it seemed connected to the pathway that a lot of us were on, of being more quote unquote connected to the stories of other people in the world, but less connected to actual people right around us. And so that was the realization in 2016. The work I started doing after that has evolved over time. Originally, I started a set of conversations with the title The Barnraisers Project, specifically around race for folks like myself who are white and in majority white communities. And they started out as conversations about race, but really they did start becoming more deeply conversations about loneliness and lack of community. And as that started evolving, I started realizing that although I had a particular story of why I had maybe drawn away from other people that was connected to my race, was also connected as a dude to my gender, more and more people started coming up to me and said, Garrett, I have a different cultural background than you. I have a different gender background than you, but I'm pretty darn lonely now too. I think we're in a world that's pulling us all apart. And over time, the work that I did on the Barnraisers Project, and the work, my writing, my public facing writing, primarily through my newsletter, The White Pages, start being specifically around race and more through kind of this bigger question that, yes, we're lonely. Yes, we want to be drawn towards our neighbors, but could it also be true that doing things locally with our neighbors, that could be a potluck, that could be a book club, that could be a conversation about, what's the change we need to make on our block, that could be a religious organization, that could be getting involved in your kid's school, et cetera. Could those somehow not just be things that make us less alienated from each other, but could that actually be the building block of a different kind of politics more broadly? And so that question, which I have a generally optimistic answer about, is still the core of my work. So every day I wake up, I get to connect with somebody across the world who is trying to A, start something with their neighbors, and or B, has started something with their neighbors, is now trying to make it add up to something bigger. So I say right now that in my training work and my writing work, that I've kind of built for myself the world's only hope-giving echo chamber, because the only people I get to talk to all day long are people who are actively discovering that there's something to this community building stuff, and are of course struggling with how it's difficult because they're doing it with people and people are annoying and we get in each other's ways and we're flaky and we mess up and in all the above, but who are also really, really energized. So that's a pretty fun life right now, all things considered.
You're right, that you're getting to talk to people who are doing amazing things. And that's actually, I think, part of what keeps Jen and I doing these conversations. So thank you for being one of these fun people to talk to. And we've been enjoying that as well during tough times, getting to talk to folks who are sharing the strengths that they're seeing in their communities. They're sharing the ways that at a local level, things are happening, things are interesting, things are in many ways hopeful, and that's actually kind of the approach of a program that Wisconsin Humanities started and continues to be working toward, which is called Community Powered, and is around training folks to do some of that asset-based looking and thinking and building and growing. So that's really great. You're talking to the folks doing the work.
As are you all too, yeah. And it's fun to do so, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I forget the exact word you used, but when you were talking about like a positivity echo chamber, one of the program that I ran for Wisconsin Humanities was Love Wisconsin. It was started in 2015, 2014. And so basically the idea was, the social media landscape was different then, right? So the idea was to build a community across difference, specifically on Facebook. And it was telling these like very layered, very produced stories of Wisconsinites around the state. And they built this audience of like 100,000 plus people. And we actually had like, I don't know what the right word, but like, expert researchers look at what was happening in the comments section to see that there was like all this positivity across difference and how people really wanted to connect. But, in the last several years, that landscape changed. Like Facebook, just became an unmitigated,
Yeah.
expletive show. And so like you really couldn't do it anymore in the same way. And so, right. So like these spaces all change. And I mean, I just think a lot about, which I think sounds like is sort of where you started this, is like what we can control is where we can dig in, where we can build relationships, in real time. So it feels like you've taken the thing you've done locally, and then now you're trying to find the other people around the country that are already doing it or want to learn from how you're doing it, or you learn from how they're doing.
And a lot of it is simultaneous, right? I think I I very much feel that this muscle, right, of having the majority of what you think about on any given day, in particular when you are thinking quote unquote politically, right, or in terms of a social commitment, be the immediate neighborhood around you, that still feels like a really, really new muscle for me. And so I feel like I'm building that muscle simultaneous to getting to learn with and learn from folks across the country and world who are also, oh yeah, this feels new for me too, right? And some cases I talk to people who feel like they're much more developed in that muscle than me, and that's also really, 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 really rad. But a lot of us, I think, are building it for the first time because, as you just noted, even if we used to be really good at this, I think a lot of us, the promise of early social media was a really, really beautiful promise. And the reason why we turned to it was not nefarious for any reason. The idea that, oh my gosh, I could immediately have a tether. It could be easier to be tethered both to this person I just met yesterday that I can friend, and with my college roommate, and with like my best friend from 5th grade. That was such a cool promise. No wonder we kind of outsourced that for a while, right? And hoped that there would be tools that would make it easier.
I like how you said that. I want to hear, because I've read a little bit of what you've written, kind of an argument for the potluck,
Yeah.
And I know that you've had pushback. You've had to argue that, yes, I know it sounds hokey, and yes, maybe it's just dinner together, but there's something to this. So can you share a little bit more about, you mentioned potlucks already. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I talk a lot specifically about potlucks, not because I think that is the only gathering that matters, not the only way to get people together, but it's a gathering that I have a lot of affection for. I talked earlier about how formative having adults in my house having meetings was, but growing up being toted to a bunch of potlucks was also very, very formative for me. Part of that was my parents had 6 kids, so they never turned down a potluck as an excuse to have somebody else feed us. They would take us to every potluck in town. They would also take us to every time a car dealership would have free hot dogs. And because of this, I am obsessed with potlucks, and I have a couple brothers who are obsessed with cars. And so I think that it's very, very clear how you become what you become. But I remember specifically the potlucks that we would go to, and this is growing up United Methodist in Helena and Missoula, Montana. And so places that in the 80s were hard to get to from the rest of the world. And yet the potlucks I was going to we would have speakers come from South Africa, right? We would have speakers come from Guatemala. Like speakers come from Cuba. It was these, and not every single potluck was about international solidarity, but a whole lot of them were. So there was this simultaneous sense I was learning that there is this space where there is a natural kind of form and function of solidarity, right? What I love about a potluck on a symbolic level is that it is not a charity event, right? That it is everyone brings something, everyone eats. So the gap between receivers and givers of care is diminished. And yes, you could, I guess, if you want theoretically to play score and to say, oh, well, this person made a Julia Child beef bouillon, right? Like, and this person literally just grabbed a bag of chips from the store before coming. But I've never been in a potluck where that actually matters. And one of the things I actually love as a prompt for people for potlucks. I love to actually have, if it's a group of less than 20, to have people go around and tell the story of what they brought with the prompt that if the story of what you brought is a treasured family heirloom recipe, that is a cool story. If the story of what you brought is, I only had time to get potato salad from the deli because this is what my week has been like, that is also a really, really interesting story, right? And so I love the form and function of them, but I also love the form and function of this was a space where, yes, we were very much connecting on, we are a community that has assets to give each other, that is directly benefiting from each other's assets right now, but we are connected to something broader in the world. And you mentioned earlier the skepticism that one could get from, Garrett, come on, you're saying that potlucks at a political time like this, with such urgent political needs, with authoritarianism, with war, with a level of bigotry and hatred that is just feels so palpable right now. We've been gathering around tables for a long time. If that worked, it would have worked by now. And my counterpoint to that is, yes, there's a lot of gatherings that can keep the world as it is, right? A neighborhood gathering to say, for instance, we are meeting our neighbors, but just to oppose this affordable housing development in our neighborhood. That's a gathering to keep the world as it is. But throughout history, and this is something I'm deeply curious about, when I look at actually social movements that have truly changed the world, the question of like, Garrett, if a potluck would change the world, it would have already. And I would say, yes, it would have already. And in fact, it has, specifically, that if you look at countries that have transitioned from intense levels of wealth inequity and anti-democratic structures to significantly more democratic structures, if you look at the history of the social movements that often inspire us most in this country, either in many cases, there were actual potlucks involved. We have Social Security in this country, partially because of unemployed workers' councils that also popularized potlucks across America in the 1930s. But sometimes through other means of sharing food and making food was core to the Montgomery bus boycott. It was core to the labor movement. It was food co-ops were core to the transition of social democratic societies in Northern Europe. Potlucks, yes. My counterpoint to, do you think potlucks could actually change the world, is quite frequently, yes, they do. But they require folk, this is not a religious statement, but they are an act of faith, meaning they are an act of believing that if you keep this consistent ritual that both feels and is tiny, that there's going to be something magic that happens over time through the tending of that space. And that tending of space will, sometimes the magic is a community discovering its collective power. Sometimes it's a community thrust into the spotlight when it was not previously thrust in the spotlight, but was better equipped to be in the spotlight because of the ties that they developed together. And sometimes, often, as you all noted with the work you all do, it's discovering the assets that were right in your face the entire time.
Yeah, and I think that last point, because I'm definitely a policy person, I used to teach a social policy class, and so, you know, good policy matters, like to be a functioning society. But, I mean, I'm not going to say this right, but like right now, we really just have like those like tech billionaire oligarchs that are like consolidating power, and like so. What am I personally going to do about that? Like, if whether I decide I'm going to do anything is whether I can stop that tomorrow. Like I can't, right? And so to your point about there's an intentional push to like keep us apart, to think that we have nothing in common with each other, to think that everything's hopeless, right? And so doing the potlucks, I fly this bagel flag, like whatever the thing is
Yeah.
that people are doing to both connect locally, find commonality, find community, appreciate how we're different, And so to start building, whether it's to support through mutual aid, whether to your point, something is coming, ICE is showing up in the neighborhood or some policies coming locally. And so we are now equipped to try to respond to that. Like it's really like the most important thing we can be doing now because we can do it, and then who knows where we'll go. And can I just riff a little bit on this bagel flag? Can I indulge in this?
I was wondering, I was
Yeah.
going to make you do it. I didn't know how much you've already talked about it on the podcast, but I just think it's so cool. So
Well, because thank you, because it's connected to it's very similar to your podcast, but I want to tell you the origin of that, which has a history. So we have a neighbor that flies a gin pennant. So apparently there's maritime history, which I'm probably going to get wrong, which is like captains on their naval ships in the ocean would put up the gin pennant flag, and so other probably only officers could come aboard and have a drink together. So we have a neighbor who flies a gin pennant, and so I would go to his house when he would fly it. He'd make an incredible cocktail. I'd be talking to people I never saw before. It'd be delightful, and then I go home. So I have this whole bagel thing going. I'm like, can I just fly a bagel flag? And so I actually have a fairly disparate group of people. Like I have the people I know through my storytelling work. I have my neighbors. I have the random people flying the bagel flag. So I just flew it yesterday. Like 40 people showed up over the course of 3 hours, and ate bagels and told stories.
And this was in the midst of a blizzard.
Well, no, it was right before the blizzard.
Wow,
It was right before the blizzard. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But so I'm just like, can't everyone like? Is there someone who has to teach polka dancing? Put up a polka flag. Like I'll come learn. Like I just think it's just it's both fun, but Jessica's raising her hand. Are you going to put up a polka flag?
No, but I have such great things I want to say just from what you've said.
Yeah, no, go.
Well, so as I said in the beginning, I'm up north and came up here for a long weekend retreat at a beautiful retreat center, and we're all snowed in. And so lovely things are happening, right? And what has been happening is everyone now has sort of relaxed into this situation. All of the folks that are running the center we're all in it together. So everyone's offering different things. Someone did teach a samba class yesterday. So that's why I was like, yes, exactly. So people are saying, oh, I'll do this, I'll do that. And a lot of it isn't just about what you can sort of entertainment offer to share, but also the food. So I was thinking about that because that's one of the first things that happened is that instead of our meals being served there's volunteers that work here at the center and there's a program and the meals are served at a certain time and the dinner bell is rung. But the announcement from the Zen monk, actually, who I'm at a center, I should say, that was founded by Franciscan nuns over 40 years ago. And it's always been under the vision of it being a center that is for all spiritualities. So that's the aside. But the announcement yesterday, as we were planning for the next day or two here, was about food. And immediately it was, okay, now everyone's doing their own dishes and everyone's contributing and who wants to help in the kitchen and who's helping with cleanup. And so that becomes communal and it just changes everything, right?
Oh, that's such cool stories. How's the food been that you all have had to figure out together?
Well, excellent. I mean, the food here is excellent, right? Because you're in this space where it's prepared with love and you're eating amongst folks who want to be there and are slowing down and enjoying and savoring. And so, of course, there's the cookbook, but the recipes themselves are not particularly complicated or really all that unique. But everyone wants to go home with the cookbook from the Christine Center because while you were here, you enjoyed your food so much.
Yeah. Well, I had two kind of cool connections as I was listening to both of you were there, right? The first was to the point of what changes when you teach a group, when a group just discovers, oh, we kind of have to do it ourselves. And in the critique I often get of the potlucks is, oh, Garrett, everyone knows how to do that, right? And in particular, if you're part of a religious community that in particular, we already know how to do potlucks. Well, I recently kind of a weekend of speaking events at really, really big, fancy Episcopal cathedral in Portland, Oregon. And the great, great community does a lot of amazing work in the community. And they have a big commercial kitchen. They have paid staff. They have a lot of meal programs that they do for homeless neighbors. But they have not, no one in the church can remember the last time they have had a potluck as a church. And so they were very kind to do a potluck as one of my events. And it was really, really fun watching this very, very well-oiled machine that was used to, the parishioners were used to coming at the time that something was supposed to start and having everything all set up with warming dishes and everything by a professional staff ahead of time. And you watch this community kind of panic as instead volunteers were asked to show up a half hour before with no chairs set up, no food there, and worried that their community that they normally take for granted is just going to be on it, that they had to create it. And my host there just kind of asked me as the guest speaker to just step aside and say, watch and see how folks do. And they did great. And everyone's reflection afterwards that night was, oh, we need to have another potluck. Not because Garrett was fine, but like that we discovered something about ourselves doing that, right? And I think that there is something about these moments when we realize if it were just us, what would we build together? How would we take care of each other? That are really, really powerful.
Yeah. You used the word faith when you were saying it before. And as you're talking now, it's just making me think it's trust, right? Those folks that were used to setting up the food had to sit back and trust that people were going to show up with food. And that's, that level of trust with a potluck is always there because generally you don't sign up for what you're bringing. So you're just sort of trusting that a meal is going to come together and that the ingredients will work out. There'll be plenty of dessert and there'll be plenty of all the things that everybody wants. And if it isn't a square meal, you're still going to go away nourished and satisfied.
and you have to deal with the fact that people are going to be imperfect and therefore break trust. And what do, right? The people are going to be flaky. People are going to forget about something. We're recording this podcast. You all are being so kind to me on a snow day where I was paying attention to my kids home from school and totally missed the start of the podcast recording, right? And that's annoying and that messes up your guys' day. And yet you still said, you know what? We're going to give Garrett and this conversation a chance. And I think trust that we're going to try to do this okay, not because I have the ideal set of neighbors who are always going to be really, really good at this, but this is who I got, and I am who they've got. And there's some wonderfulness in that. We're going to discover what's really great about each other, and we're going to be annoying sometimes, and we're going to be flaky, and we're going to, I'm thinking about the next Quaker meeting I'm a Quaker, and our next, we have our next potluck for our whole meeting in a week or so. And the person organizing it keeps making announcements every time. Please, you all, last time we only had desserts and that was fun. But could somebody bring something savory this time? And yes, we could probably build some systems to solve for that, but we're not good at systems. We are good at earnest pleas. So that's how we're going to figure it out as a community. Yeah.
So Garrett, let's because not everyone's read your potluck manifesto. So if you could just maybe give us some of the specifics, like of what you're trying to accomplish across the country with it.
Yeah. So the current project I'm working on, I'll pause and say first that for the last few years, my primary offering in the world has been a whole lot of trainings that I run online. And through the Barnraisers Project, someone comes to a training, and my offer is just, if you've been a part of my network of trainings, I will offer you support and coaching however much you want it, right? And that's been really fun for me to connect one-on-one with people who are trying to do this community building across the country. But it has been very, very hub and spoke. And one of the things I worry most about is, as we talked about earlier in the conversation, that the faith or the trust or the patience that your little tiny silly gathering can actually add up to something bigger is a lot to ask of us, in particular during times when every day the news feels like one more flood of crud on our little islands of hope, right? And so what I'm doing this current year is hopefully a project that will help connect gatherers across the country and make folks who are doing their little tiny silly gathering feel like they are part of something much bigger than themselves, while also telling a story to all of us that I think this actually is a movement brewing. So we're doing a relay. It's called the Declarations of Interdependence Relay, or the Interdependence Relay, or there's a reason why I just call it the relay, because that many syllables sucks. So, but it is 50 gatherings. A lot of them will be potlucks, probably not all, but 50 gatherings in 50 states, starting this next month in Alaska and Hawaii, eventually probably with the timing finishing up about an entire year later in Maine. And then I think we'll probably have a party in DC afterwards to celebrate the completion of the project. I would love to attend all 50 gatherings myself, but I've got a 7th grader and a 3rd grader and a life here in Milwaukee. So while I'll be attending a few of them, what will be attending each event is a big, gorgeous wooden box. And the wooden box has 50 compartments in it that right now are empty, but that are eventually going to be filled by each gathering. And so the Alaska group will fill theirs and also make a set of commitments. What are our set of commitments to each other here locally? What are set of commitments or resources we have to offer to a nation of gatherers? They'll send it on to Hawaii. We'll then send it to Washington State and onwards. And while that's happening, we're going to be connecting those folks in online communities. We are going to, in some cases, we're going to be physically connecting them. People from one gathering are going to have the time and place to go to a future gathering. Everyone, I hope, is going to be following along primarily on our website, which is jointherelay.org. And I think we're going to mess up a whole lot. The box, I would be shocked if it doesn't get lost at least 3 times. But again, I am trusting that we are going to have 50 incredible stories of hosts across the country, and that something magical will happen from connecting. But I've never tried this before. Maybe it completely falls on its face. So right now, I am looking for people who are intrigued by the potential of what could happen, but who are potentially ready for it to fall down on their face in 50 states across the country to come do it. And I think that the box will probably be coming through our state here in Wisconsin. I think fallish, most likely, is going to be when we hit home. So
you think it'll be in Milwaukee?
Well, this is the question, right? I already have a lot of really, really cool ideas from across the state of people who've raised their hands. And this is the challenge, right? That I've already gotten lectures, for instance, from Californians saying, Garrett, how can you reduce an entire state to one gathering? And I'd say, I can't. And you are welcome to join the relay in spirit, and we will celebrate you even if the box does not come to you. So selfishly, I really want the box to come to Milwaukee, but I've told, for instance, some of my communities here, if I really think that it's better to have the box come someplace else, just the timing or the story, or I just can't imagine this group not having the box, we are going to host our own gathering here in Milwaukee without the box, as we hope a lot of other folks will do too.
Well, that's fantastic. I think you're going to have a lot of people who want to be involved. So hopefully in Wisconsin, there will be many potlucks happening during this wave of the relay. How can folks find out about this? You have a website.
So jointherelay.org is specifically for this project, right? Where you get all the information about it, apply, get on the interest list if you're not quite ready to apply. All that's right there, jointherelay.org. If you go to garrettbucks.com, which is my name, GarrettBucks.com, you're going to find links to that relay. You'll find links to the white pages, my newsletter. You'll find links to the Barnraisers Project, where I am not currently actively running new trainings right now as I start up the relay, but there's a chance to find out about new trainings through that. Wrote a book, and links to that will be on there. So join the relay specifically for the relay. And if the broader Garrett Bucks cinematic universe is of interest to you, all that can be at garrettbucks.com. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
This is great. This is my favorite way to have spent a part of this huge winter snowstorm. So
Felt cozy.
It was great. Thank you so much for popping on with us, and I hope we stay in touch.
Yeah, it's been such a delight to talk with you, Garrett, and thanks for with your kids running around the house, still joining us. So thank you so much.
Happy snow day.
Happy snow day. Bye. Well, I really enjoyed hearing all about that work that Garrett's doing, and also remembering the power of food. So we didn't go down that track, but I think we could all really share our own potluck stories, share our own experience of what it means to come together around food and how powerful that is. And so we didn't take that turn in this conversation, but it's another example of why gathering around food can be can change lives, can change people, can change communities, and is important. So that was pretty fun. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I actually really loved it. I mean, first of all, I love a story, but I really loved how we talked about, and I also liked his caveat that there had to be less than 20 people, that people talk about the story of the food they brought, right? Because I think everyone's food stories, food history, why they don't have time to make food, it's all interesting, and it's just another way to connect. So
human about what he's doing, and he's a natural at spreading the hope. So that was a really great conversation. I'm glad we reached out to him. Thanks, Jen. Good to see you.
Yep. See you next time. Good luck once the road's open getting back to Madison.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.